Welcome everybody to the first Get to Know Your Field Investigator. Today we have the privilege of talking with Bill McNeff. Bill McNeff has been investigating this phenomenon for many, many years. So hopefully he has a lot of interesting stories and insight that he's willing to share with us today. So without any further ado, welcome Bill McNeff.
Thank you.
Bill, congratulations. Look, this was supposed to be an interview, a meet the investigator type interview like we did. However, I pulled a fast one on you. This is actually going to be about you and your lifetime achievement. Now, I wrote something down. I'm going to read it. So I apologize if it sounds like I'm reading, but obviously I am. So here we go. Bill, I don't know what to say other than congratulations. I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to have you as a mentor. Your knowledge goes so far beyond anything that I've studied, experienced, or investigated. I thank you for your guidance and the knowledge that you passed on, and not just to me, but to all the field investigators. With over 70 plus years under your belt investigating this, it's just amazing. It amazes me. The depth of knowledge and insight that you have is just absolutely incredible. You are a true icon in this field, and no one can ever deny that. You know, you started Minnesota MUFON. I know you say you didn't, but you were the first to organize the chapters so that meetings could be held in person. And in 1987, you became the Minnesota State Director after only being a part of MUFON for about a year. If that doesn't say something, I don't know what does. You know, you were the one that got the Minnesota MUFON Journal up and running, and you actually took the time to send out the journal via mail because computers, the internet, etc., weren't really a thing yet. And I can't even imagine the amount of work that took. You did all that when the world thought aliens were a myth and that only wackos like us could believe such a thing. And yet you're willing to stand up and say, yes, this phenomenon is real, and I'm going to prove it. And since then, you have. Time and time again, you have. Through your thorough investigations, follow-ups with witnesses, poring over all the evidence, you have been relentless in your quest for the truth. Thankfully, the tide is changing, and the world is now waking up to the fact that all of this is real. You are a big part of that awakening. Without you staying the course and with what you know is the truth, we wouldn't be where we are now. The world would still be in the dark if not for your contributions. You've worked so hard at this for many years, and it's about time you're being recognized for all of it. Congratulations, Bill, on a lifetime achievement contribution in this field. I look forward to your mentorship for many more years to come. Thanks. So, Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and how was your childhood?
I grew up on a farm in the middle of Nebraska, or near the middle of Nebraska, and it was in the late 1930s. So it was in the middle of a drought and depression. And I remember, or my parents told me that when I was perhaps 5 years old, which would have been 1938, that I came in one summer day and said, "There's something wrong with the corn. It's growing lumps on the side." This was the first year there had been enough rain to get the corn to put out ears.
Wow.
So, so that gives you a feel for the. I didn't know about drought or depression. It was the ordinary way things were.
Right.
So,
wow. So what year were you born?
1933.
1933. Okay. Okay. So you grew up in Nebraska.
Yes.
I understand you were in the Army. So did you join the Army right after high school, or?
No, after high school, I went to a small church college at York, Nebraska for 3.5 years. And I started out in a pre-ministerial course, and I changed to a pre-med course and had a year and a half of that, and the college closed. And I decided I couldn't imagine how I could finance medical school. And by that time, I developed an interest in electronics, and I decided to try to get into electronics in the Army. So I studied electronics by a degree mail order course. That was a good course. I learned a lot of electronics. I made a little broadcast station and broadcast around the neighborhood one day, only one day, so the FCC wouldn't get down on me. Then I went in the Army in March of 1955. And it was pure luck that I got into electronics. That and a good test score on the Army aptitude test, I believe. And they decided to put me into electronic countermeasures, which is classified work. So I had to be cleared for that. And they cleared me for top secret. So I spent a year in Turkey doing classified electronic countermeasures work. And that was interesting. That was good service. It was, I can't imagine a better place to be in the Army than that. Okay, and after the Army, I went to the University of Nebraska, and it took me, with my previous college credits, it took me 3 more years to get my BSEE, and I graduated in 1960 and came to work for Remington Rand Univac here in the cities. That's how I got into electronics.
Hello, it's Dave MacDonald. I'm broadcasting live from the MUFON International offices in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm reaching out to Bill McNeff. Bill, you've been in this game a long time, 70-something years. And I believe 40 of that or close to it has been with MUFON. And I just want to make a special call out to you and to say thank you. Thank you from myself personally and for the entire MUFON family. You are an absolute icon, and we are happy as can be that you've been with us all these years. I can't imagine the wealth of information that you have gathered over all that time. So coming directly from us to you, congratulations on your Lifetime Achievement Award. You absolutely deserve it. Have a great day, and thank you again.
In June of 1951, right after my first semester of college, I was helping my uncle stack hay. And I was standing on the haystack waiting for him to boost up the next load of hay. And for absolutely no good reason, I looked up almost vertically overhead, and here was a little round black object moving through the sky about airplane or bird speed, it looked like, perfectly silently, and it was round and dead black, except it was a little fuzzy around the edges. It was probably the size of a BB held at arm's length or a little bit bigger. So if I'd taken a picture with a modern digital camera, I would have gotten pretty good resolution pictures, I think. And I watched this for a couple of seconds, and then it began to get fuzzy. And it got fuzzier and fuzzier, just like it faded out, just like the transporter on Star Trek. Faded out into nothing in the space of 3 seconds. And I thought, that is pretty interesting. And in all these years, I've been able to come to no other conclusion than that had to be a craft of some kind from outside of Earth.
So when did you start investigating cases then?
Well,
How'd that come about?
That same year, 1951, in late August, my one of my brothers and my 2 sisters, who were ages, something like 5, 7, and 10, were playing in the front yard of our house, or the farmhouse there, and they saw, it turned out, 2 different objects. They didn't realize it was 2 different objects. My brother saw one object, which he described as a cylinder. Half of it was black and half of it was white. And it was rotating in a horizontal plane as it went through the sky. And my sisters saw another object, which they described as shaped like a boat or a canoe with 3 humps on it. And one of them said that the humps were 2-tone, black and white, half black and then half white. And the others who drew a sketch didn't show the colors, but they both drew similar sketches, except my youngest sister exaggerated the height of the humps. And later on, in their early 20s, I asked them if they remembered that, and they did. And I asked them to make sketches, and they independently made sketches, which were very similar. So I have a feeling that they saw, both they and my brother saw two unusual objects.
Interesting. And that was in Nebraska, right?
That was in Nebraska.
So that probably would have been your first case that you've actually kind of
Yes.
investigated. Yeah.
And I was so impressed by this, and I knew at the time that the Air Force was investigating UFOs. So I wrote down the details and included my sister's sketches and sent a letter off to the Air Force. I never received any acknowledgement. And I have since looked at the Project Blue Book files, which are in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and I couldn't find the case. So I have a feeling that somebody looked at this and said, oh, it's a bunch of kids, and tossed it in the wastebasket.
Hi, everybody. This is Bobby, and I'm here to celebrate Bill's 70 years with Minnesota MUFON. I've known Bill close to 30 years, and he has been a tremendous support for me. So congratulations, Bill, on a job well done.
So you were investigating cases on your own then for a while, correct?
Right.
About how many cases do you think you investigated? And did you do all those in Nebraska?
They were all in Nebraska, yes. I would say that, I looked at about half a dozen cases on my own before I joined MUFON. And I take it back. Two of those were not in Nebraska. Two of those cases were one was in Wisconsin, and one was in Minnesota. And these occurred after I moved to Minnesota in 1960.
I understand that you were part of the beginning of Minnesota MUFON. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so. Well, depends on what you define as Minnesota MUFON. If you mean an organization which met regularly, that would be true. I believe I called the first meeting of MUFON in Minnesota, but there were at least three state directors before me. Robert Engberg was the state director before me. Good investigator, good friend. He passed away a year or two ago. Ray, and I can't think of the other's name, starts with an M, maybe.
So you weren't necessarily part of the beginning of Minnesota MUFON, but you did actually start the first meeting.
Yes. That would have been around the time I joined MUFON. And you had that date, which I did not remember.
February 24th, 1986?
Yes.
And that's when you became a life member.
No, I didn't become a life member until I made a contribution in the 2000s, and it might have been around 2010, 2012. I don't know without doing some research exactly when that was. At that point, I became a life member, so you could say that I am a member. I'm a life member since 1986. And shortly after I joined MUFON, it might have been a year later, that I was appointed state director. I'd made contact with, now I can't think of his name. It's almost on the tip of my tongue. One of the first the second director, international director, or director of all of MUFON. Can't think of his name. Anyway, he appointed me as state director because Robert Engberg, the state director, was off. His business took him away to North Dakota for 2 years, part of the oil exploration. And so in the interim, I was appointed state director, and I remained state director after Engberg came back to Minnesota.
You have a story about Stanton Friedman and Wally Moe, and you'll have to expand on who Wally Moe is. And
Walter-
ERA, and so
Yeah.
who were they, and what's the ERA, and what's the connection? What's the story?
ERA stands for Engineering Research Associates. It was started by William Norris and Dr. Howard Engstrom after they came out of naval intelligence in World War II. And they formed this organization to do contract work for the US government. And they investigated a number of things, but they built the first digital computer that the NSA purchased. So they had hired the guru of computer design in Minnesota, Seymour Cray. He helped design that first computer, and he stayed with Control Data until he became in an independent company called Cray Research. So Engineering Research Associates, from ERA stems all of the electronic businesses in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, I believe. Probably there was, for example, Medtronics. I'm sure it owed something to ERA. ERA was then, after they got their first commercial digital computer designed and was selling it, Remington Rand Univac Remington Rand decided to purchase Engineering Research Associates, which they did, and they called the first computer they built Univac. William Norris came along with it, Seymour Cray also, and as I said, all the computer companies and many of the electronics businesses then stem from people who were at ERA and it went on to found a number of other companies. I've seen a chart. There are quite a number of companies that stem from Engineering Research Associates. And Walter J. Moe was one of the early employees of ERA, could be said to be one of the founders. And he was interested in a lot of things, including UFOs. And he became a member of MUFON. And he was the one who told the international director that about me and that I was interested in UFOs and was investigating on my own. And so that's when Walter Andrus, then, who was the second director of MUFON, appointed me as state director.
Hi, Bill, it's Anna. So I just want to say thank you for being such a wonderful mentor for all these years. You've done so much for Minnesota MUFON, and we just could not have gotten where we're at right now without your help. Best of luck to you as time goes on, and I hope that you don't consider retiring for many more years.
And there's an interesting bit of UFO history connected with Engineering Research Associates. They hired, I should have put his name down. He became a UFO debunker later on. Dr. I'll have to get his name. He was at Engineering Research Associates, and he was studying magnetohydrodynamics in the summer of 1947. And late in the summer or early in the fall, probably September of 1947, he was called away by the US government to something that was so secret that he couldn't say anything about it, except he had to leave the company and go work for the government. And his name shows up on the list of the 12 members of the alleged MJ-12. I think by now that we shouldn't say alleged anymore. I believe there is plenty of evidence now that there was a Majestic 12. This man, whose name I can't think of, if you had the names of the MJ-12 members in front of you by any chance. So Walter J. Moe thinks that he was called away to become a member of MJ-12 and help back engineer the crashed craft from Roswell and possibly other crashed crafts later on. Dr. Donald Menzel worked for ERA and was called away by the government.
So where does Stanton Friedman come in with that?
Stanton Friedman, I've seen him over the years at a number of conferences. And after Wally Moe told us about Dr. Howard Menzel and his being called away in early fall of 1947, I told Stanton Friedman about this. And he called up Wally Moe and interviewed him at length. And you'll see the summary of their conversation in one of Stanton Friedman's books.
Congratulations, Bill, on 70 plus years of investigating UFOs, aliens, and strange encounters. MUFON appreciates all your hard work, and all of us do.
I understand that you had something to do with the Minnesota MUFON Journal. Can you tell me
Yes.
about that?
Yes. Once I became state director, I had a list of the other MUFON members in Minnesota. And so I started this simple typewritten newsletter and sent it out. The first issue invited all of these members to a meeting at a library in Anoka County, where I was living at the time. I was living in a northern suburb. Well, that is on the, anyway, invited them to a meeting, and a number of people did come to the meeting, including Richard Moss. Did you ever have a chance to reach? I don't think you ever met Richard Moss.
No, I know the name, but I've never met him.
Richard Moss was a science and I think chemistry teacher, or maybe it was math teacher at the high school in Long Prairie. Long Prairie had a sighting by a young man who came upon a rocket-like spacecraft parked in the road, and he stopped his car and saw three little tin can sized beings come out on tripod legs from underneath this craft and stared at him for a bit, and then they got back in their craft and it blasted off and it melted the blacktop. So that was one case. And then a famous, relatively famous UFO researcher was also born in Long Prairie. And I can't think of his name now. So, and it later turned out that one of Richard Moss's students had quite the UFO, quite the alien experience. He didn't see any craft in conjunction. Yes. So Long Prairie is quite a town when it comes to UFOs.
So that was kind of like the first articles that you were posting in the MUFON Journal, or the Minnesota MUFON Journal?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I sent it out monthly thereafter with local case accounts or whatever. I remember Richard Bauerlein became a field investigator, Buddy Bauerlein, and he had an aunt and uncle on a ranch in Texas. And he told how one hot night, it was too hot to sleep, and his aunt went out of the house and stood on the porch. And while she was out there, she saw a foot wide disc, glowing disc, come flying past her a few feet away.
So you've been with Minnesota MUFON now for some time. What positions have you held?
I've held state director, assistant state director, and chief investigator.
And out of all those positions, which ones did you enjoy the most?
Well, it didn't make any difference. I enjoyed them all. This is a fascinating study. And
How many cases do you think you've investigated since joining MUFON?
before I before MUFON got its computer case records up and running, I probably investigated about 30 cases. And afterwards, I pulled it up today and found that I've investigated and recorded in the computer 292 cases. So total that, and it's about 300 and probably 320 cases that I've investigated as part of MUFON.
What was your first case?
The first case that I investigated for MUFON,
Sure.
I believe that would have been the either the Colorado case or the let's see, there's the Middletown, that isn't quite right. There's an area in the western part of St. Paul. It's right across the river from Minneapolis. It's called the Midway District.
Mhm.
So I call that case the Midway case. The Midway case involved a little almost 4-year-old boy who told about a visit by his friend Bug-Eye. He identified Bug-Eye as looking like the creature on the cover of Whitley Strieber's book Communion. So it was either that case or the Colorado case. And I haven't had a chance to look at what records I have of those to tell you which is which. They both happened in the 1988 or so time frame.
What can you tell us about the Midway case?
The Midway case, the mother was in bed, and her husband was gone that night. At about 12:30 midnight, she heard what sounded like her young son, we'll call him Carl, running around downstairs, but she heard another pair of footsteps along with his that she couldn't identify. She assumed it was her, maybe her daughter who was yet younger. And she was in bed upstairs. She called to them downstairs and called, "Get back in bed," but she didn't get up, and she promptly went back to sleep. And she awoke perhaps half an hour later to the sound of the plunking on the ukulele. And she went into the boy's bedroom. The older boy slept in the upper bunk, and the younger boy in the lower bunk. And the younger boy, we'll call him Carl, the near 4-year-old in the lower bunk, was plunking on this ukulele. He wasn't supposed to have that. It belonged to his older brother. It was kept on a shelf in the kitchen above the refrigerator, way too high for him to reach. And so this alarmed her. She saw that the lights were on downstairs. She went downstairs. She found that the kitchen door into the backyard was unlocked and standing open. And she was really alarmed. She also found a chair with a step stool on it pushed up in front of the refrigerator. And anyway, she went back. She locked the door again, turned off the lights, went back upstairs, and took Carl into bed with her. And shortly after they got back into bed, there was a loud bang in the air above the house somewhere. And Carl said, "He's back." And his mother said, "Who's back?" And he said, "Bug Eye." Well, but nothing else happened that night. But in the morning, Carl was complaining about his ears. So she took him to the pediatrician. And the pediatrician said, "Well, his ear canals look a little bit red, but I don't see anything else wrong with them. I don't think it's an infection." The mother told her friend, who was a MUFON member, about this incident. And her MUFON friend said, "I think this might be one of those abduction cases." She came over to visit. She brought along Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, and set it there on the coffee table. And as they were talking, eventually Carl came by and he saw the face on the cover and pointed out, he said, "My friend Bug Eye." They started asking him about Bug Eye, and he told how Bug Eye had been out in the backyard. And anyway, they basically got the story of some kind of interaction with Bug Eye. And then I was then called, and the mother was willing to be interviewed by me, and so I came out with my tape recorder and tape recorded an interview, and we asked Carl questions, and we got his recorded answers. And then we went down went out into the kitchen and pushed a chair in front of the refrigerator and put the step stool on top of it the way it had been on that eventful night, and asked Carl, "Climb up there on the chair and get that ukulele." And Carl said, "I'm afraid I might fall." And his brother said, "I'll hold your hand, you won't fall." So Carl climbed up there and he stretched as far as he could. He was still a foot short of reaching the ukulele. So we can guess that whatever, got fetched the ukulele could reach at least a foot further than Carl could. My conclusion was that was pretty good proof that somebody other than Carl or any family member had, it was pretty strong evidence that someone unusual had been there in that house that night.
Sounds like
Perhaps of an extraterrestrial nature.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Hero. I joined MUFON back in the 90s, and I remember going to some of the first meetings, and Bill and Craig Lang and some of the other guys would get up and they would give these speeches about these sightings that they saw. And I was really impressed with that. So after several years, I decided I'm going to become a field investigator and find out how they get all this information. And when I did, I realized that you got to learn to ask questions, and you got to ask the right questions. And I learned a lot of this from Bill. And over the years, as I was a field investigator, Bill would help me out with, some of the other guys would help me out with the cases. And I realized that Bill was very professional, and he'd always give me right guidance. And I want to thank you, Bill, for that, and for all your professionalism and all your dedication for all your years of service. And again, thanks again for your help in the investigations of the unexplained UFO phenomena. Thanks again.
My most interesting case, I'll call it the reptilian case. And this happened probably about 2017. And a couple in Minnetonka lived in a townhouse which was 2 floors, and the garage, of course, was on the lower level, and off the garage was a room with the furnace and the air conditioning, all one unit. And there were 2 incidents that I recorded from this family. That was the woman, the man, and her 2 daughters. And anyway, the most interesting incident was one night she found herself in under the control of a reptilian down in the furnace air conditioner room. And this creature had her under some kind of control. She was only loosely controlled. She could reach the doorknob. She turned it and she couldn't open it from the inside. It was locked. It was as if it were locked. Of course, that's not the way it's supposed to be. You can lock it from the inside, and so nobody outside can get in, but you can always get out. But in this case, she couldn't open the lock. So that gives you a picture of alien control right there that's pretty sophisticated. She was held by this creature basically for 4 hours, according to her story. She ended up with marks on her body, nothing very dangerous, but I remember there was a equilateral triangle puncture on her shoulder in the middle of some grid marks, like some tiny rake with the tines about 1/8 of an inch apart had been drugged down her shoulder and left red scratch marks. And she had photographs of all of these. And at the time I saw them, it had been at least a couple of weeks had expired, but I could still see some of the marks. She got the impression, I suppose telepathically, from this reptilian that they weren't interested in her so much as in her husband. So I think they were holding her captive. The idea was they were holding her captive while they did something with her husband. Her husband had no recollection of anything until about 4:30 a.m. He woke up to his wife calling for help. She was called for help periodically. And he went downstairs, was able to open the door into the furnace room, and there she was all alone. But at that point, in a pretty alarmed fashion, after being held for 4 hours, it turned out that all of the batteries in his shop down there, he's kind of an inventor, were run down, and the garage door opener wouldn't work anymore. He had some electronic evidence that something had been there. That has to be my most interesting case.
Hi, Bill McNeff. This is Bob Spearing. I'm MUFON's Director of International Investigations, and I just want to congratulate you on all of your milestones. I know that in 1965, during the November blackout on the East Coast, I was 5 years old, and the next day my uncle came running over saying they think UFOs were involved, took out the Clay Power Station at Niagara Falls. Little did I know until this week that you, at that point, 1965, had already been investigating UFOs for 14 years. That just blew me away, all right? I also see that your badge number is 6681, and that you've been a MUFON member since 1986, the year of my first UFO sighting. Most people become field investigators, stick around for a while and disappear. It's only the cream of the crop that stay forever, like you have. I'm overwhelmed at your dedication to MUFON. I'm overwhelmed at your desire to get to the bottom of the UFO question. I sincerely want to wish you a happy 90th birthday. I want to congratulate you on 72 years of investigating UFOs, and I hope that we'll be working with you for many more years to come. Thank you so much from me, all of MUFON, and it's just a great pleasure to have people like you in our organization. Thank you, Bill.
What's your most favorite case?
It's a toss-up between two. One is the Joe Simonton case from April of 1961, and the other is the Colorado case from something like 1987, 1988. And the Simonton case, Joe Simonton said about 11:30 one morning, he just finished an early or a late breakfast, and he saw out the window saw a craft land in his side yard. And he went out there, And it was like two soup bowls, one turned upside down on the other. And as he went out there, a door lifted up like a trunk lid, and a man was standing at the door. Looked fairly human, but his gaze was very penetrating, Joe said. He felt like this man was looking into his very soul, he said. But this man made motions like tipping a cup up and drinking from it. And he had a very shiny metal container in his hand, and he handed it down to Joe, and Joe thought, well, he wants me to fill it with water. So Joe took it down to his basement and pumped it full of good well water and brought it back to the man. And through the window, he could see another man with his back to them, sitting at 3 control panels, and also another man who was flipping pancakes over on some kind of a griddle with a spatula. So Joe made some eating motions, and the man in the door reached over, picked up, I think, 5, at least 4 of the pancakes, and handed them down to Joe. And then the door closed, the craft floated up with a hum about 40 or 60 feet, and then tilted at 45 degrees and blasted off. Joe said it was out of sight in about 10 seconds. So that was the Joe Simonton case. And of course, there was an aftermath, but I won't get into that.
What's an aftermath?
Well, the Air Force sent investigators. Dr. J. Allen Hynek visited Joe and got his story. After Hynek interviewed him, he said, I don't believe Joe is lying. So he was impressed by it.
Hi, this is Dean D. Harport. I have known Bill McNeff since 1990. His scientific background, his long years of experience, his first UFO investigation was in 1951, and his selfless demeanor have made him an invaluable part of Minnesota MUFON since its inception. His knowledge of the UFO phenomena is unsurpassed, and he is always ready to share his wisdom and experience with others. Always humble, always professional, always knowledgeable, always ready to help. Bill is that exceptional person who shares his immense experience investigating the UFO enigma. Bill is a prince among humanity. Thank you, Bill, for all these years of help that you have given me and all the members of MUFON.
The other case is the Colorado case. It probably was about 1987 summer. This family was visiting some friends in Denver from the Twin Cities. They were from the Twin Cities, and they were driving west in eastern Colorado when they ran into some kind of a detour sign, which detoured them out onto a lonely country road. The first thing that happened was they met a UFO coming down the highway at them, which passed them, made a U-turn, and then flew along parallel with them for a ways before it buzzed off. Then next thing they saw a man standing motionless by the side of the road as they got a good look at him as they passed, and she said he looked like he was dead. They went just a little further, and suddenly the cars began to slow down, and it came to a stop. She looked over at her husband at the wheel. He seemed to be frozen at the wheel, and she decided she'd better get out and investigate. She got out. She walked to the back of the car. They had a trailer hitched on behind, and she looked over the trailer hitch into a field, and there she saw 2 creatures. And under hypnosis, when she described this under hypnosis, the first clue we had that she'd seen something was she laughed, and she said, "You're so cute." And she said that they had come over to her and told her they weren't interested in her so much as in her children. And at that point, she asked to be taken out of the trance. She'd been there for an hour and a half, something like that, and she was getting tired of it. So she came out of the trance, and we never found out what happened after that. but she had accomplished her mission of finding out what had happened. She didn't remember anything until she was hypnotized. So those are the two most interesting cases. And my favorite case, because favorite cases for in the case of Joe Simonton, he behaved with complete courtesy and aplomb. He behaved better toward these aliens than most humans do toward the aliens. And then the same way with her. She, to see these creatures and to laugh instead of being afraid of them, I thought that was really something. Those are my two favorite cases.
Tell me, how do you treat each case? I mean, when you get a sighting report, how do you go about beginning to start an investigation? What do you do?
Well, the first thing I do is send an email to the witness and ask for an appointment for a telephone visit. And part of the time, there's no response from the witness. The witness doesn't realize that we're going to investigate these things, and apparently are not don't want to talk to an investigator, either out of shyness or fear that their identity might be compromised. They don't realize that MUFON does their utmost to keep people's names confidential. So at any rate, I try to talk to the witness and have the witness tell their story again. I take notes and compare their story, their verbal story with their written story. And usually there's a good match. And in that case, it gives you confidence that they've described things accurately. You then ask questions. I ask questions to get as much detail I can about the interesting parts of their account on their observations. And then I am able to usually come to a conclusion about the case, give the case a disposition according to the conclusion I came to.
I understand you're part of the ERT. MUFON's got some ERT. What is the ERT?
The ERT has the main purpose of being an organization or being people that experiencers of alien contact or alien abduction that are concerned about telling anybody else about it. We provide someone that they can talk to and tell their story and perhaps gain some insight. In some cases, we may give some kind of suggestion as to what they might or might not do about this. But we're trying to help these people come to terms with what happened to them.
And what does the ERT stand for?
It stands for Experiencer Resource Team. So, as far as resources go, we can give them the names of hypnotherapists, hypnotists who could regress them, and if they are interested in getting at what seem to be some hidden parts of their experience. And we also can provide contact information for several online support groups.
Do you treat ERT cases the same or different from a regular CMS sighting case?
They're treated differently from a regular CMS sighting. We have a different set of dispositions that we decide apply to the case, and I guess that's all I can say about that.
So they're treated differently. Like a sighting case, you would investigate, whereas a ERT case, you're really there to help the witness or the experiencer.
That's right.
Okay.
Although there is one part, and this is that we have a a data sheet that we can fill out after we've talked to them, which if they have cited a suspected extraterrestrial or different extraterrestrials, they can describe these creatures, and we can record the data on the appearance, the actions of these creatures, so forth. So we do collect that data.
Hi, Bill. This is Kathleen Martin, and I am here to tell you that congratulations on being a ufologist for more than 70 years. You have contributed so much to our understanding of UFO phenomena, and we truly appreciate what you have done for all of us.
Throughout your years of investigating, and how long have you been investigating now?
I've been investigating to some extent since 1951.
So throughout those many years, have you noticed any trends or similarities in many of the cases that you have investigated?
The triangular cases are they are a later development, triangular craft. I cannot remember when. I believe we were talking something like the well, let's see. Now I won't try to put a date on it, but they I don't recall any triangular cases earlier than say 1960,
Okay.
just off the top of my head.
So for all the cases that you have investigated, have you ever gotten any really good pictures, and are you willing to share them?
I have never personally gotten a good picture of a UFO, and as far as the pictures that our witnesses submit, of course, the witness retains full copyright rights to anything that they took, but MUFON, they sign that MUFON can use this also. So MUFON has some copyright to it also. MUFON can, in fact, it says that MUFON can use these pictures or videos in any way, any manner that they see fit. And of course, they are good for publicity, for education, and for trying to put together a case for the reality of the phenomenon.
Have you ever had any experiences or sightings yourself since the 50s when you had your first one?
I had an experience which I think I can only attribute to extraterrestrial action. That's my best guess as to what it is. July 2 years ago, that would be 2021, July of 2021. I woke up at 2:30 a.m. and felt itching on the back of my left arm, just a little bit of itching. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and there were 3 triangular marks about 1/4 of an inch apart, or maybe 3/16 of an inch apart. They looked like puncture marks. They were red but not bleeding, and there were 2 tracks between 3 of the 3 dots, so it formed the letter V. That's what I saw at 2:30 a.m. The next day, the marks had changed somewhat. There was an additional connection so that the marks formed a triangle, and one of these marks extended past the puncture mark, formed a curved tail. And I have a photograph of that.
So what are your thoughts on this whole phenomenon, ETs? Are they flesh and blood? Are they a spiritual thing, interdimensional? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we can guess that they are both extraterrestrial and interdimensional. There's some evidence. In fact, the 47 pages from the DIA, which purports to be a briefing document for an incoming member of MJ-12, features an interview with an alien who was retrieved alive from a spacecraft, from a crashed craft. This alien describes what has to be called something like Star Trek, but they're more like, well, quite a bit like Star Trek, I would say. They visit various planets and intelligent life on these planets, and they're kind of like tourists on one hand. On the other hand, if there's something they can do to help, they're willing to do that. But also the Star Trek directive seems to be in force. That is, that you don't interfere with the development of a developing intelligent race, basically. He said that they might deviate from that a little bit in as you would help a baby who's learning to walk, perhaps. And of course, you know, well, those of us who are parents know that when you, there's not a lot of help you can give to a baby who's learning to walk. And there is evidence, one science writer compiled a book with 50 different sketches of 50 different aliens who have been reported by people. These are all cases of some detail and what would you call it? You've got some confidence that these things happen to these people. So there are at least 50 different races involved. I've heard from other sources there are 80 races involved. Well, new ones may be appearing all the time. So the majority of them seem to be not against humans, not belligerent, although some of them have pretty brusque manners in dealing with human beings. But there, as far as somebody who means us would like to take us over, there are apparently only a few races out there like that, and the more benevolent ETs are doing their best to protect us from these bad guys, I'll call them. That's what I believe. I think the evidence shows that those things are quite probably true.
Hi, Bill. Mike Harris here. Just want to say thanks for all the years that you've done. You've been very organized with handling the cases and keep tracking them. We appreciate that. You've also helped with meetings and hosted meetings, and you're a lot of knowledge. We appreciate that. And personally, you're a true gentleman, very nice man, and you're an asset to the fund. So thanks again.
How has a lifetime of investigating this phenomena affected you? Spiritually, mentally, family? Spiritually, not very much. I call myself a Christian. My theology has had to expand to cover the possibility of intelligent beings from outside of Earth. And that's no big stretch as far as I'm concerned. It's however we got here, you could expect other intelligent beings that arrived the same way. Thank you, Bill, for your time and for your 60 plus years of investigating this UFO phenomenon. It's just absolutely amazing. I can't imagine being able to do it for that long. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. The stories that you've heard and the things that you learned is just wow. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you later. You're very welcome, and I'll see you later. All right.